Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, AI in Facilities Management, Challenges and Opportunities. I'm Jennifer Getz, the Editorial Director of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar is presented by AkitaBox. Before we get started, I'll cover a few housekeeping items. There will be a Q&A answer segment at the end of this presentation today. Please find the question box in the dashboard on your screen. This is where you can submit questions for the speakers today. If at any time you experience a technical difficulty, please send us a message via that question section and someone on our team will answer you privately. Now I'll introduce your speakers for today. So Josh Lowe is the co-founder and chief solutions officer for AkitaBox. With a degree in architecture, a background in construction, and a penchant for pushing the boundaries of new technologies, Josh is leading the way in the building industry. He is passionate about helping AEC firms, building owners, and facility management professionals make data-driven decisions for operational efficiency and success. In 2016, he co-founded AkitaBox, a SaaS application for proactive building management and facility assessments. AkitaBox offers a visual, location-based way to maintain facilities that delivers near real-time data on the built environment. AkitaBox is also the first and only software for completing facility assessments from start to finish. Phil Miller is the Chief Operating Officer / Assistant Director of the Capitol Square Review and Advisory Board for the Ohio Statehouse. Phil's current responsibilities include operations of a 10-acre complex in the heart of downtown Columbus, Ohio. Prior to joining the Ohio Statehouse, Phil spent over 30 years with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, most recently 10 years as Field Operations Administrator for the Division of Parks and Watercraft, where Phil was responsible for overseeing operations of Ohio's 75 state parks. So, gentlemen, thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for the intro.
Of course.
Thank you.
Now, to kick things off, we're going to start off with a couple poll questions for our audience. So our first poll question is, what is your favorite AI movie? Terminator, AI, iRobot, Minority Report, or Ex Machina? You have about 20 to 30 seconds to respond.
We should have even put another on this one. Too many to choose
I
from.
hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
Choose your favorite on the list.
Yeah, your favorite on the list. Okay. So we'll move on to our next one. We will be addressing the responses at the end. So do you understand what AI is? No clue, sort of, or I could write a book on it. Which one would you guys say?
Sort of.
I'm still in the in-between the sort of, and I could write a book on it, to be honest. Ever evolving.
Yeah. Okay.
Lots of sort ofs in that group.
Lots of sort ofs.
We'll have to be on our toes, Phil, for that 10% there that can write.
Absolutely.
All right, so this is our final poll question for now. Would you consider using AI at work? Not at all, thinking about it, currently using it, or keep the robots away from me? Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
Nobody said keep the robots away from me. So I think we're at least a good group of people to be talking with here today and kick this thing off. So.
All right, awesome. Well, I will let you guys begin your discussion.
Thanks, Jennifer. Well, she did that. I probably should have done this before, but we were going through this. Let's start here, Phil. And, again, this is meant to be a conversation for everybody attending. Really want to take one of our customers who's really kind of on the edge of looking at how some of this stuff can be used and utilized and wanting to have a conversation about it. And I wanted to start here with this, Phil, because, I think many of us, it sounds like at least a lot of us on the call, at least sort of understand AI, and some are using it today and a lot are thinking about it. I think what's missed a lot, though, is that we're already using it all over the place, from virtual assistants to security cameras. What's your take on that, at least today, and what you're using maybe in your daily life and maybe not work quite yet?
Well, yeah, that's a good question because some of us are very much aware of it. Some of us understand that we've been using it. I think some of us are totally unaware that we're using it. Um, I a few weeks back, we had a family event at our house, and I purposely brought up AI in a conversation because we had kind of the generation sitting around the table, and I asked kind of the pool question. So, well, what do you guys think about AI? And of course, my mother-in-law was like, "No, it's the devil. We can't be dealing with this kind of stuff. It's going to take over the world." And there were a few other comments in there, and then my son looked across at me at the table, and he kind of winked at me. He said, "Gang, we're already using it." He said, "As a matter of fact, the event horizon has come and gone." And the table just got really quiet. And of course, it was what do you mean event horizon? And he goes, "Well, listen, I'm not trying to get real deep here, but when you text on your phone, and spell check comes up or word suggestions come up, um, you got a Roomba vacuum cleaner. How do you think that thing knows where to go in your house? Google Maps, if you were unfamiliar with how to get from point A to point B on vacation, of course, you got Google Maps in your car, and it's even giving you updates on traffic jams or accidents. So I think we need to be aware of the fact that it is all around us. Um, check out at the grocery store, Josh. You and I were talking about that a while back, and I think there are a lot of different applications of and different types of AI that we're using in everyday activities. So that already starts to point to the fact that, okay, it's here, we're using it. It has many positive attributes, but there's still some unknowns about it. And so um, another piece, and I kind of thought earlier when we were putting together our presentation, Josh, back in the 60s, if for those of you, and I'm probably giving away my age, there was a cartoon called The Jetsons, and it's supposed to be set in 2062. But what I thought was interesting is they use video telecommunications just like we're using today. So we've started to realize that some of those things are already coming into fruition. And so we're thinking about, well, what does that mean? And how does that affect us every day? So yeah, it's here.
I'm not going to start investing in sprockets yet, but yeah, we're definitely moving in that direction. And to your point, I think we see it pop up in different parts of our lives at times. One place I personally see AI now on a daily basis is, with the onset of being able to just kind of plug and play things now with Wi-Fi and hooking up cameras on my property. Now it thinks all the deer in my field are pets, but it knows it's not a person, and it knows if it's an insect making motion that it doesn't need to tell me about versus, hey, there's a package here, and it actually detects the package outside my garage and will give me an alert saying there's a package here now. And a lot of those things, I start to think about how they're infiltrating my daily life. And in some ways, I think I border on the, is it invasive? And on the other side of the fence, I lean into, but boy, that was nice that I didn't go out there 3 times checking for the package. I just went out there when it told me the package was there. So I think we all have to struggle with that a little bit. And I think we have to struggle with that in our businesses. But I think to your son's, very observational point, the event horizon has passed. And I think we're here talking about this today. And so many people registered for today because I think we all realize it's coming, and we're all trying to figure out how to put parameters or figure out how to do something with it.
Absolutely.
The thing that scares my parents the most, they're in that boomer generation, the idea that a car can drive itself is terrifying, right? To my parents. And, I kind of look at this going, well, how long is my son, who's now 12, actually going to drive himself around? Um, is he going to drive himself around in modern cars? I don't think we're to the point where in, 4 years by the time he's driving, we're going to be all driverless, but that stuff is coming and that ship has sailed to some degree.
Right. So when we're thinking about facilities management and we're thinking about some of the pieces, the applications of our daily lives, what we're doing every day, day in and day out with facilities management, and we think about the fact that AI is all around us, what are the implications? And I can't stop thinking about those implications in my job. And obviously there's a few more points that we'll make in our conversation, but that's where I've been going on a regular basis, constant improvement, not change for the sake of change, but adapting and resiliency in our organization, being nimble. And it's kind of funny because even though I'm technically part of the state of Ohio, we're a bit different than an agency in that we don't report to the executive branch, we report to the legislative branch. So we've got a few extra components and ability to be a little bit more nimble and have more latitude, which that directly points to the fact that, well, okay, then how could we use new technology such as AI in our workplace? And I think that's where we as facilities managers are spending a little bit of our time as we're trying to be thinking in the future and being proactive in our daily activities.
Absolutely. I'm going to get moving on here from this slide and we'll start looking at things that have happened in the past. And I love this, and I'll start the video here in a second, make sure that I mute it as soon as I start it, and I'll let you talk about this. But, tell us a little bit about, this experience that happened to you and the things that we're looking forward to in the future, hopefully, and maybe being able to avoid, whoops, hang on. Well, geez, that wasn't supposed to happen. Bear with me. Play. There.
Has anybody reached
There we go.
Laura Buddy?
Mute it there. Let you tell us what's happening here, Phil.
So what facility manager wouldn't see this as their absolute worst nightmare? Absolute worst nightmare. This is actually footage that was taken back in December of this past year. Water pouring from the Senate chambers down into the floor of the Senate and flowing out the door and down the stairs. And of course, as I'm thinking, it's between Christmas and New Year's, nobody's here. I'm drinking a cup of coffee at 9 o'clock in the morning thinking, oh, there's me. That was me looking in there thinking, what the heck am I supposed to be doing? First of all, I got to figure out, how am I going to turn off the water? It's going to take me a second, just get up into the attic and shut off the fire suppression system. So what essence happened there was we had a cold snap back between Christmas and New Year's in the Midwest. And in Columbus, Ohio, we had sustaining winds of over 40 miles per hour, which brought the wind chill temperatures down between 30 and 40 below zero. And the northern side of the building, which is where the Senate chambers exist, we had an air handling unit that was not able to keep up with the temperature, and a fire suppression pipe broke. And then this was a couple of days later as things started to thaw out. This is what we saw as a result of that pipe break. So, of course, first thing to do is to shut off the water and do an immediate cleanup. What can we salvage? How do we keep mold from growing? That kind of thing. But the second thing is, well, what happened and why? Obviously, that's so we can make repairs. The sergeant at arms put a trash can below where that water was coming in, and boy, it'd have been nice if that was able to catch all that water. That water went down the stairs, and of course, there's 2 floors below that, and so you can imagine that water, does what water does, and it goes straight down. So obviously, we follow up with repairs, and this hits social media in Ohio, and it's on the 6 o'clock news that night. And my family's watching it. my phone's blowing up saying, dude, what's going on? I have consultants calling me, asking me if we need help. And the question was, well, what happened, and why did it happen? And again, pretty quick and easy answer, but the question that I kept asking myself as the COO over operations is, what could we have done to prevent this? What could we have been doing differently? And this is a bit of a struggle in a lot of organizations where you may have some very talented, seasoned individuals on your maintenance team who know to look for certain things during certain times of the year. But we've been through some significant change on our organization, and we've lost a lot of really good, talented team members. And nobody thought to think about the fact that this tremendous wind chill may have an effect on different MEP systems within our building. And here we are. So I continue to ask myself, how could this have been different? How could we set this up? Do I need to put something in my AkitaBox software that tells me that I have to do something every winter to potentially winterize the building? And it's more complicated than that, Josh. It was just, AkitaBox isn't going to tell me what kind of weather I'm going to have outside. I'm going to have opportunities to do certain types of preventative maintenance. I'm going to be able to do that preventative maintenance in a planned environment, but I can't predict some of these other types of events that are going to have an effect on my facility. And this is where that first question of, man, if I had something other than the fact that my fire suppression system told me you have water flow, by the time the water was flowing and my system was, my phone was going off, and I'm like, what do you mean the fire suppression system is on? Because then, of course, once the fire suppression system's on, the fire alarm goes off. So by that time, it's too late. So I kept asking myself, well, gosh, what could have been different? Could there have been some kind of an automated notification that would have combined weather with what is happening in our facility and how we manage the facility? And at one point, I kind of came to this point that what if AI had been something that we were utilizing? AI in a certain capacity, in a certain application that could have assisted us in giving us some additional notifications. Not that I need a ton of additional emails, because I think we all get plenty of those things, but certain types of, and I have email filters, of course, like a lot of us do, but if we could have had some kind of notification about this, it could have at least maybe sent up a red flag, and we could have done some proactive management in that regard.
Yeah, and you bring up a lot of good points here, Phil. And this is, when I'm out and about and talking to clients and talking to, other innovators, frankly, in the industry, talking about AI and the problem that you're describing, the one thing that we talk about all the time and the steps that you're already taking is that AI, frankly, needs data points, right? So, and a lot of the things that you're talking about, the weather's a data point. What is the temperature? But now it's also logging that we had a catastrophic event. Well, what type of event was it, right? And so now if you can start to capture, and I think this is where I think a lot of folks in the industry and a lot of folks in your shoes struggle with, how do I get from the video that's happening here to something calling my phone saying, hey, the wind's blowing from the northeast, it's blowing at this many miles an hour, it's this temperature outside, you are prone to have your attic and your pipes freeze, right? Whatever that might be. But then also, is it as simple as saying, well, actually what we need are more sensor data points. I need temperature sensors sitting up in the attic. And in fact, we missed a data event, right? Where if I would have known what the actual temperature in the attic was for how long that caused that pipe to burst, in the future, if you had a temperature sensor up there that said, hey, we're getting close to that temperature, we may need to use AI to maybe automatically reset temperature set points downstairs so that it warms the attic naturally. Hey, it was Christmas vacation. You were probably running the building not at, hey, it's occupied, people need to be comfortable levels. It was being run at, we're keeping the lights on and the building running and the pipes warm, but it maybe wasn't warm enough in that instance.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think, Josh, there's other. Obviously, this is just one example of a potential situation. You know, I think about the hurricanes coming up from the south and along the east coast, and the different possibilities of how we might use some of this technology to our advantage. And it doesn't have to be just weather; it can be any number of things. It could be social unrest. It could be gosh, it could be anything. So,
I mean, you're in a unique situation being there at the heart of democracy in the state of Ohio, right? Where you think about things like civil unrest potentially differently than somebody who's not near that political heart.
we do here, yeah, we do. As a matter of fact, I can look over at the security cameras, and I can see that we have a situation out front. It's not bad. It's just common protesting, but it happens here on a regular basis, and that's democracy happening, and it's a good thing. It's an exciting thing, but it also is a situation that needs to be managed on a regular basis.
Awesome.
So, how do we do a better job of all of those different kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to address this question that just came in, and we can talk about it here moving forward because I think we're getting to that. But, Michael said, hey, catastrophic events are one thing, but how do we use AI for everyday FM, make teams more efficient, all those types of things? I mean, frankly, I talked about it from a home perspective, but Phil, you just talked about looking at your security cameras there at work. How does AI on security cameras help your teams maybe be more efficient, or in your case, not more efficient, might mean better reaction times or higher awareness of knowing where things are happening at any given time?
Right. So I think we all have different levels of security depending on the type of facility that we're managing. Obviously, a high profile facility such as the Ohio Statehouse is one thing. A distribution center in the country may have a different type of security that's needed. Point being is, even though we have people here on staff, we have the State Highway Patrol here on staff 24/7, 365. What could we do to augment that? And here's where I'm going with this. Let's just say, for the sake of conversation, you've got a person sitting in a room with a bunch of monitors and all the different cameras. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. And I don't know about you guys, but at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm typically staring at the back of my eyelids. And I think it can get pretty dull trying to just review and manage and look at what's happening in all the different security areas. I already know that artificial intelligence can track people, and it doesn't mean that they're tracking an individual on a personal level. What it really means is, if somebody's walking onto our complex in the State House at 2 a.m, I know artificial intelligence can track that person from point A to point B to point C. We have had different types of vandalism that occur late at night. It's usually graffiti type of situations. Occasionally it's projectiles at the building kind of thing. But if a person doesn't notice that right away, doesn't see that person right away, but AI is able to see a person move from being 150 feet away to being 20 feet away, it sends an immediate notification on your screen saying, hey, an individual is very close to the building. That is, from what I can see, is a very good way to supplement our current staffing abilities. And that way, suddenly a person has the wherewithal to recognize and see that, hey, there's activities happening on the West Plaza. Do we need to send a trooper over that way? Is anything happening, or is it just another a day and they're taking a shortcut? But it's a wonderful way that we could potentially supplement a security situation or our normal security efforts here.
Yeah, another way that, and we'll get into this slide here as we talk through this. One of the things that we need to address as a part of this, right, are the concerns. Coming from that. I mean, you talked about tracking. You obviously put the right caveat with that we're not tracking, hey, Phil just walked into the building and he touched his phone 4 times. Like it's that general movement. It's, hey, there's a human generally, and they're generally moving this way. I think that gets into things, perception versus reality, and, fear of the unknown, and things like attitudes. And, David made a comment in the question area about, how, hey, we're in this IoT age and wireless connectivity. You'd think we could bring in all this data super fast and super cheap. And that's true to a point. But then we also have to talk about, is that data validated? Is it structured in a way that we can use it? Just knowing the temperature all by itself doesn't necessarily give me any context. Is it inside? Is it outside? Is it in a mechanical room, where we're generating lots of moisture? Like, where is that thing? Because knowing the context around that data is just as important as having data. And so, yes, we can get it fast and cheap, but we also can't drown in it either, right?
Well, and yeah, and if we in my world, I guess, if you will, we're talking about legislators, and we're talking about legislation, and we're talking about change, and we're talking about different viewpoints and how those things work with respect to democracy. But the point I want to make here, Josh, is attitudes. Generally, we as humans don't particularly like change. We don't necessarily embrace change. Some of us don't even like the thought of change. But I think we have to recognize that change is the one true constant. I mean, that's going to happen. So I'm not saying, and I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture all the time when I'm talking about specifically change. Change isn't always good. But if I've learned anything over the years, if we can adapt to change and we can be resilient, how do we take advantage of a bad change? And how are we always moving towards good change? It's fear of the unknown. I don't know anything about AI. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want people to know how much I have in my checking account. Well, what are we really talking about here? I mean, what is it we're really talking about here? Are we talking about staying ahead of the curve? I don't have competition per se in my profession. You, on the other hand, you do, as a private sector. As a facility manager, my competition is myself, if you will. It's the work that I have to do every day, whether it's reactive maintenance or it's preventative maintenance. And then, of course, the lack of knowledge, what we don't know about AI. What we don't know is what we don't know. It's hard to be critical of anybody who doesn't know what they don't know. So what does it mean? And then the other thing that I think is really important, that as a facility manager, is the return on investment. If I've learned anything, I have got to be able to say to my boss and the board, when are we going to get a return on this investment? What's the added value? AI is this unknown, and it's scary enough in some respects, but we're already using in others. Well, okay, let's just say if we're going to use it, well, what is that return on this investment? How long is that going to take? What's the upfront cost for this type of investment? And to which I don't have all the answers, or probably very few answers. But innovation is where I point when I look at some of these kinds of things, because when I arrived here at the State House a couple of years ago, I was asking the questions that any new person would ask, and is, well, why are we doing this? And why are we doing that? And some of the answers were, well, we've always done it this way, which, okay. And there's a reason that was originally developed that way. But does that reason really hold water today? Is there a better way? In other words, we can carry a buckets of water to a burning building, but someone discovered fire suppression, irony, systems are much more effective than buckets, but it's not perfect. By the video that we just watched, it's better than buckets, but it's not perfect. So what are some of the newer tools that I can put in my toolbox that are going to make my job more effective? Maybe make it a little bit easier, supplementing personnel and staff with what we're doing. I'm not looking at it from a replacement standpoint. Most facility managers are dealing with budgets that are getting smaller and expectations that are getting bigger, and costs that are getting bigger. So if you have that curve of expectation and responsibilities growing, and the cost of doing business growing, and our budgets are shrinking, that's a widening chasm that we're trying to deal with every day. And can AI supplement that?
Yeah,
I'm asking. Yeah, and that's the question I'm asking.
It's interesting because I think it can, right? I really do. I think to that point, and maybe some of the fears around this, I mean, because you talk about, what can AI do? And frankly, part of it is, Thaddeus brings up a point of, hey, how is the use of AI meeting, increases in cybersecurity requirements? It seems to him that taking the human component out of it would be a reduction of security and allow an individual more control if they breach the firewall than if you're using AI. I think this comes down to, look, I think, Thaddeus, to kind of answer that question and in a simple way, AI's here. If you're not using AI on your security side to check for breaches in code and all those types of things, like, an individual can't possibly look through that information as quick as AI can, or code review, things like that on the security side. I
Sure.
mean, that's why Amazon invests so heavily in AI on their side for security and things like that. It's because we're entering this stage of so much information that without AI or without tools, I mean, frankly, AI is a human invention to deal with our human problem of having too much data.
Well, so I'm going to toss something else out here, Josh, because that's a really good point. And data is the piece that we've struggled with for a number of years. And I say we facility managers struggle with, because data is critically important in making decisions, but it's a bit of a double-edged sword. If we're spending time collecting data and managing that data, does that potentially take away from the time that we need to spend managing our facilities? And the answer is yeah. We've got to be able to balance that time. And that's what we've been historically doing over the last 10, 15, 20 years, is that data has become more prominent and it's become more important. Yep. Because we use it, and we use it to justify our budgets. We use it to justify our purchases. We use it to justify capital improvements. We use it to justify acquisitions and depositions of property in facility management. We use it for a lot of different reasons, but it's got to be managed. So if we're already assuming that and in agreement that data is critically important to the heart of our business, how do we manage that? Do a better job of managing that data?
Absolutely. I mean, to your point, as we start to look at benefits, right? I think we've spent enough time on the scary demons. Let's look forward a little bit. You're right. Data is the new oil, right? It's the new thing that we can all capitalize on internally, and we all have a lot of it. In fact, one of the things that, is interesting is a lot of the data we have is unstructured. And can we start to use AI actually to structure that unstructured data to make it usable? It's this, chicken and the egg scenario, right? Like, which
Right.
came first, AI or the data? And in fact, can AI even help us create that data moving forward in a more effective way? But then even from that, like, Michael asked a question earlier, so is AI a tool for reactive, or can it be used for proactive? The answer is both.
Yeah.
And in fact, the data points for reactive can in fact inform proactive. If we start to see that, hey, at 100 hours of runtime, or at 3 months of service, or whatever that is, this thing fails. Well, we can actually use that reactive data point. This goes to, we missed a data capture opportunity when all your pipes burst, right? But like, we can now track that data point with everything that came with it and use that to be proactive in the future. And I think that's why we see a lot of people kind of focus on a little bit more of the reactive use of AI right now. And I think that is the chicken and the egg conversation. If we don't have enough data to make good proactive decisions, we need to build that somehow. And so I think focusing on when to react at the right time, and then taking that data and focusing it on how can we be proactive about reacting at the right time. I think it's a natural progression that we're going to go through as an industry. But really the answer is yes, it can be used on both sides of the fence.
Yeah,
How
and
do you see that,
facility management, yeah, many of us spend a lot of time in a reactive world by virtue of our very tight budgets and limited resources. And we all dream of the day where we can be spending a majority of our time in the PM world. I'm thinking that AI could supplement that by supplementing positions, improving efficiencies. What about my assets? What do I need to know about my assets other than the age? What kind of information can I collect about the assets that help me understand a little bit more about the performance of that asset and the life expectancy of that particular asset? What if that asset prematurely breaks? Do I have warranty information at the tip of my finger, or has that been, I'll call it mined? That's not really the proper term, but has that already been added to my data set by this supplement of an AI environment, so that when I go look and find information about the asset, it's all already in there, and I didn't have to spend any time putting that information in AkitaBox.
I mean, let's walk through the scenario that we're working on right now, right? Let's just operationalize. Let's show efficiency and how you can use AI in your daily life. And number one thing up here, benefit of AI, data collection. What if, all you had to do is take 2 pictures. You walked up to an asset and you took a picture of the asset so you could see the whole thing. And then you took a picture of the nameplate, maybe multiple nameplates depending on the asset, but you took pictures of the identifying information. And out of that, we can tell you what type of equipment it is, the size of equipment, all the pertinent information like make, model, serial number, manufacturer, everything in that sense. And then even, long term with enough data, hey, that thing's rusting out. Now you can't open it up, but it could probably tell you roughly what condition that asset's in as well with 2 pictures. Boy, that's a lot of time right now to go out and take pictures and write notes and enter in data and do all that. And if all we tell it is, hey, based upon these 2 pictures, here's the output that I want you to pull. And to your point, well, now that I know the make, model, manufacturer, and the type of equipment, can it pull down the O&M manual? Can it pull down, hey, by the way, this has been under recall for 2 years? Like, what are the other databases that we can point this at to help us out?
Right. Or how about this, Josh? How about, the elevators that you have remodeled in the Statehouse are now between 25 and 30 years old. Those components that you're going to need to fix that elevator are no longer manufactured and available. What happens if I get that information proactively? What happens if my elevators are currently working okay, but I have information that tells me that this equipment is no longer available? Do I start thinking about capital planning? Do I start thinking about, oh, geez, that air handler, this particular type of air handlers I have in my building, I got 26 of these things, and they're all generally the same manufacturer. And I have to go west of the Mississippi just to find one of these things, and it's going to take me 8 weeks to get it. How do I deal with that situation? What if I have that information coming to me before I ask the question?
Mhm.
Makes me
Absolutely.
wonder.
You're going down the right paths, right? Now it's just a matter of, do we have the data and can we apply the AI at it? And these are the scenarios, but this is why, and I love the fact that you're here with us today and sharing your thoughts, because we need to engage this from all directions. A bunch of smart engineers sitting in a room by themselves building AI inevitably will not come up with the right solutions unless we engage on how we envision the real efficiency to come down, right? Where is that efficiency gain, and how do we get it, and when are the right times to be capturing data? Because frankly, this, sending boots on the ground around collecting data is not cheap. So we want to make sure that if we're going out and we're doing that and we're going through that effort, we're capturing the right things, so we don't have to go do it again. And that's, generally as well, that's also going to be one of the next helpful things. Hey, when you're done with that work order, take a picture of the equipment again. Here's another one I'll throw in. Can AI in the future? And the answer is yes, it can once we have enough data. Tell me if that has made a huge change in conditions since the last time we touched it. If you make that part of the process as well, and this is also getting into, we need to change some of our, with AI, we'll have to start getting used to changing some of our habits. Data is king, and if data is king and that's what we're all chasing, we need to make a better habit of taking pictures, right? And capturing data as part of our daily rounds. I mean, high-end clients are using things like robots and Spot the dog to run around with cameras on them, in manufacturing settings. But, you have people on the ground all the time. We need to start getting them kind of trained up on being data capture engines, essentially.
Sure. And if you're a facility manager who's managing facilities in a large region or across the United States or potentially even internationally, you can't be in all those places at the same time. So putting together projections can be challenging. If you have different facilities across the nation and you're trying to develop the projections, you need that data to be able to help you with those projections. And even though we, again, as facility managers, look at data as a double-edged sword, as it's only as good as the information, our reports are only as good as the information that's currently in there. I do think that there's, the pictures and then the subsequent information that's added to the data that's added to the data set, and then the analysis of that data and the reporting that we do specific to that data, I just think it can be extremely helpful, supplementing what we do every day in facility management. I think there's some things we still have to understand, but boy, I think there's just some great opportunities, Josh.
I agree. I think I'd like us to talk a little bit on the back end of this before we get into Q&A fully, even though I've taken them kind of along the way. I think we talked about a lot of great opportunities. I think the way that I'd like to leave this with folks, and then we can go into Q&A, is talking about kind of, let's level set now. You and I kind of went, into the future here. Let's bring it back to today. I think a lot of folks, the conversation I have is like, well, how do I start? That's the question I get all the time. How do I start? How do I even position myself to be a good candidate for this in the near future?
Josh, I'm going to toss something else out here before you even get to that piece, because I think that's an important question to answer for ourselves. The first question that I had to ask myself anytime I start to look at something that's different, anytime there's change, and what is my attitude towards change, and how am I embracing? Check that. Let's take let's take the word embracing out. How am I taking advantage? Keeping in mind that change isn't always good. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But how do I take advantage of change? That's the first question. The second thing I think we, as facility managers, have to assume we have a full understanding of our mission and our corresponding key performance indicators. And that means that we're using data and communicating the results of that data across our organization to identify problems, forecasting issues, and realizing opportunities. So, and in other words, if we're confident our organization is reasonably good at collecting and managing that data, we're effectively managing that data. Perhaps how can we supplement the acquisition and management of that data? And that's where it gets to the point. Where do we start? Where do we start?
The place that I always talk with clients, and you've gone through this, right? It's get your baseline. You've done that. You've gone through, you now know where all your assets are, you know what they are, you have the base information on what type and size and all that stuff in the system. And so you've taken that first step, right? Then the question that I have is, what other data do you have? A lot of folks have BMS data or BAS data. Well, great. Let's at a minimum understand and have a link to the BMS or from the BMS into AkitaBox so that, hey, if there's a fan alarm going off and I know that that's mapped in AkitaBox, but in my BMS, it's, this one line diagram that shows me a fan maybe on the second floor. But if I can go now and I can go and find that and service that because of that, but now also let's utilize that data. Let's start to look at things like BMS, failure log things and identify opportunities in that.
Josh, I think that's a really good point. I think, since AI is already here, facility managers, we're going to have to ask ourselves, how is it being used now in facilities management? How is it currently being used? Because that's what any facility manager bumps into another. It's like, well, how are you doing this? How are you doing that? How are you using AI? How is it improving your facility, your facilities? At a minimum, we have to continue to ask the questions and continue the dialogue so that when we get to the starting point and we start to see the different success stories, where are they, who has them, and how can we employ some of those different pieces so that we're taking the incremental baby steps towards AI and seeing the success stories in it. I think we could draw the conclusion that, well, I still don't really know what it is. I've looked up the different definitions of deep AI and machine learning and these different pieces, but I'm going to need to talk to a guy by the name of Josh and ask him, well, what are the different kinds and how can I use them as a facility manager? Is AkitaBox going to provide that for me?
Well, we can absolutely have a conversation about it and get deeper. I won't go into all the specific types of AI that are out there. I mean, and if you want, for anybody on the call, if you want to, it's a quick Google, or you can reach out to me and I can send you some more in depth.
And I didn't mean to set you up there, Josh.
No, this is great though. But it is something that people need to roughly understand, because if you think about it, AI is written by someone that's got a group of people. It has a creator, right? And so, and AI has different strengths and weaknesses for different things. And so there's different, basically deep language models out there that have the ability to do different things and create different things. ChatGTP is kind of the big one out there that kicked off this firestorm of AI only 9 months ago or something like that. It hasn't been that long, yet we're all engulfed in it right now, which is actually quite fascinating from a technologist standpoint of how quickly really ChatGTP kind of changed the landscape that quickly that we're now all over it in a matter of months. But there's things out there, right? Go play with it. I encourage anybody to go get an account and just play with it, ask it questions. I use it for research all the time because I can get some kind of quick general things back that then I can use that to go get more pointed with. I also use it to create data. you can now actually write things in, and it will take stuff and create a spreadsheet for you based upon, kind of inputs and what you're looking for down the line. So there's a lot of kind of upfront uses for it. I think what we're all discovering right now is we're just saying, well, what data do you have? And we're doing this, on the technology side. Well, what data do you have available? Can we mash it together? And then let's run AI insights on it and let AI tell me where the anomalies are. Now, I don't know yet if those anomalies are helpful to help me make decisions or if they're just anomalies in the data. But I think right now we're all in that a little bit of discovery mode of just saying, well, we have thesis, right? I have a hypothesis of, well, if I take, BAS data and static pressure data and apply it to this, I should be able to tell you, a week before that filter needs to be replaced based upon a static differential, right? Like there's things that we can hypothesize on, but we're still all in that like testing mode. And so I think that's why I tell people, get engaged, start telling us where that value is, because that's how we all evolve together as an industry, is all being upfront and having these conversations and talking openly about where we think the greatest efficiency gain is, or where our biggest staffing problem is, that maybe AI
Yeah.
be able to supplement that staff that we're weak on, right? Those are the things that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and especially when being in an environment where it's hard to get good help on the technical side, boots on the ground, I guess we'll call it. And with the struggle of having boots on the ground and getting qualified people to tackle some of these challenges, I see the opportunities of AI supplementing being all that much more potentially important. Certainly interesting.
Absolutely. With that, I want to get through the one more poll question, then we might have time for one more Q&A here at the end.
Yes. So after the discussion today, would you consider using AI at work? Absolutely. I'm more inclined to look into it, or not really. You have about 20 to 30 seconds to respond.
I'm assuming based upon the earlier response that we're not going to get any not reallys, but we'll see if we changed anybody's mind to be more negative than that. Started. Well, we got a couple. We got one not really, maybe. But yeah, we got a lot of absolutes and people who are inclined to look into it. And I mean, oh man, something happened. There. I'll leave it on this one. Actually, I'll leave it on this next one for the end. But we do have some time for a few Q&A here, and I see there's a few things in here, so I'll just run through these really quick. David made more of a comment maybe on, contextualizing data, basically that we can gradually teach AI about the, correlation, so that, and data points, so that we can basically lead it to have the ability to interpret conditions, helping your pipe break, Phil. And absolutely, David, I think that's spot on. It's a matter of just, we need to feed AI first with some kind of hypothesis and how that's going to work out, and then test that for a while until we get some consistent results.
Absolutely.
Derek made a comment here about what is the health risks associated with AI, electromagnetic radiation, both low and high frequency systems. I want to be very clear, AI is not a sensor. I think maybe that's where some of the health concerns are. AI is really just computing. So I guess if you went and stood in the data center where the AI is computing, maybe some issues there, but honestly, people work inside those environments all the time. I think time will tell. I don't think any of us are health experts on here that can answer whether or not low end radiation will kill us over time. Another one here about, will all the information that it has for your assets, when an issue comes up or a failure, could it possibly tell you what went wrong? I mean, yeah, absolutely, Phil. I think that's what you're alluding to the whole time here, is that before you think about it, it's at, hey, did you think about this? And now you're thinking about it and going, wait.
Exactly. I might be really irritated, Josh, because it's making me think about it, when all I really want to do is drink my coffee at 9 o'clock in the morning just for 3 minutes to see what emails I have come in. But as a facility manager, isn't that what I really need to know? And if I've got some really good experienced maintenance people, maybe one or two giving me that. But when they're gone and I'm not done with my plan to try to replace these folks, who's reminding me of these important things as I'm sipping my coffee?
Absolutely.
Who's reminding me?
It's our we need to come up with a name. Maybe, we have Alexa and Google. Maybe we need to come up with Hey Bob or Hey Phil. It can be, we can, come up with
something catchy,
facilities
right?
assistant there. So here, an anonymous attendee said, we have tons of facilities data from our IWMS, but very few resources to analyze it. Work orders, part requisitions, plan maintenance, BAS data, etc. What are tools available to analyze this data and report out to stakeholders? I can answer that from our perspective. We have an integrated BI tool. BI stands for business intelligence. But if you go out and look, there's several BI tools on the market. Google even has one. However, it's not as easy as a spreadsheet. There's definitely some learning curve to BI tools, and you have to have some knowledge in order to plug them into your systems. But
Right.
really, that's why we went with an integrated one with our system. But it is really those BI tools that allow you to dig in. I mean, even in ours, like, you have the ability to, you can look at AI. Basically, it will suggest things to look at in your data. May be useful, may not, but it goes, hey, there's something weird about this. Maybe you should look at it. Those are the types of systems that you use. They're out there, and we have an internal one at AkitaBox.
Well, and if you use if you use data consistently, and your reports are managed, or they're already established reports, so you're using some of those same reports over and over again about different MEP systems, or the facilities, building envelopes, windows, whatever that may be. You can start to see there may be some anomalies as you have these. I don't want to use the word canned reports, but having assistance in developing that up front, whether it's a consultant or whether you have an individual or individuals or a team that's focused specifically on doing that. I think that AI can have a place to supplement that into the future. That's a really great question.
Absolutely. With that, I think we got time for one more here, so I'll throw this one out there. Sarah said, hey, can you please talk about, the ability to pull in data from IoT referenced above? I'm assuming it's a question that we answered earlier. But I mean, I think that, Phil, you answered earlier a little bit, but, and maybe I'll ask the question a different way. If you could choose the most valuable data point, if you were to put sensors throughout your facility, what would you choose? And I'll throw some things out there just to get your brain going. I mean, I have clients who do everything from occupancy to air quality to temperature to humidity. They put vibration sensors on equipment. I know it's a hard one, but if you had
all the above. You know what? I'm going to say water. If I have to answer that question right now, water. That is the most damaging
water sensors.
Yeah, damaging element to our facilities that I know of. But yeah, that's a tough one. Water sensors,
well,
humidity and intrusion.
Most of the questions.
Yeah, I would say energy management too is one of the factors I've seen.
Absolutely.
As being really helpful. Energy management, security, maintenance, it's all those different areas. But Josh, Phil, thank you so much for spending time with us today and for sharing all this valuable information about AI. We'll have to see where it goes in the future.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Of course. And special thank you to our audience for sending in questions today. A recording from today's session will be made available on our magazine's website, facilityexecutive.com, and at akitabox.com. Thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.